Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this February 7th, 2023, a Tuesday. Do not miss this show. I want to tell you guys a lot. I want to rant a little bit. We are in big, oh my gosh, we're in big trouble. And I'm going to get into it right away. First thing is, do you remember that balloon? Well, of course you remember the balloon. It's been all the news everywhere. But the balloon from China floating over the United States. Well, I did some research last night. I think it was Operation Hardtack, where the United States was testing military devices, nuclear devices. Okay? And what they found out was they found out a lot. They did underwater tests, where they blew up nuclear weapons underneath the water. They did on the land. They dropped weapons on the land. They dropped them at ground level. They dropped them up in the air. And they also tested nuclear weapons that they could put on balloon. And, they found out an awful lot. One of the tests that they did in around the early 1950s was they put a nuclear device on a balloon that was, by coincidence, almost identical to the balloon that flew over America. And they put it up into the atmosphere at roughly 85,000 feet, and that's about how high that balloon was flying across America, by the way, just saying. And they blew up this nuclear device up high in the atmosphere. Well, what they found out was that it put all these nuclear devices, all of them, put off something called an electromagnetic pulse. All of them, even the ones that are gone on the ground, near the ground, put off an electromagnetic pulse. But the ones that go off near the ground or close to the ground or just above the ground, like the ones that blow up cities, the electromagnetic pulse from one that's way up in the air, because it interacts with the high-level energies that run around the Earth. You remember, Nikola Tesla wanted to harness these energies with a tower and power the Earth. And perhaps the Great Pyramids were some sort of devices to harness energy from that goes around the Earth. This energy, there's an energy field around the Earth. Well, when they explode this nuclear weapon up into these energy fields way up above the Earth, what they found out in these nuclear tests was that it's 1,000 times more powerful, the electromagnetic pulse that comes off of a nuclear weapon blowed up way up and high up, like 85,000 feet up. 1,000 times more powerful electromagnetic pulse than a nuclear weapon that's blowing off near the ground. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that one of these nuclear weapons that blows off in the city above the ground, generally they blow them up, they do what's called an air burst, a few thousand feet up, only produces 1,000th as much. So it only travels from just a few miles away, the pulse. But one that's blown way up in the air can travel hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles. Perhaps even 1,000 miles it can travel. The electromagnetic pulse. And now the next question you should be asking me is, what does an electromagnetic pulse and what does it do? Well, back in the 1800s, there was an electromagnetic pulse that occurred naturally in the environment. And we wouldn't have known about it except for the telegraph operators. This electromagnetic pulse was called the Carrington event. The telegraph operators, it fried all of their electric equipment. And big sparks came through and burning came through their lines when they were trying to operate their telegraphs. It burned up the electrical lines that they did have. And they didn't have much electrical infrastructure back then. But what it does is, if there's an electromagnetic pulse, you don't even feel it. You wouldn't even know that it happened. But all of your electronics would know. All of the electricity that comes into your house, your television, your laptop, your little cell phones, your car out in the driveway. It's got a computer on board. Everything that's electronic in our modern day life, our cars, our television, everything, your cell phones, everything would just instantaneously go dead. The circuitry inside it would be fried with no way to repair it. Now the big communication lines, all of the electrical infrastructure we've built that runs our power grid would go dead too, fried, and would need extensive repairs. That's if we had the manufacturing capability to repair it, which is a big key, because when everything goes down like that, so does manufacturing. So how are you going to repair something? It's a catch-22. How are you going to repair something if it's all dead? Now, another thing I want to say about these balloons, they put off because they're all made out of fabric and they're made out of things that are not metal. See, radar, like they use at NORAD to track things, has to have a radar target. Things that are synthetic materials like plastics and balloon fabric and things like that don't put off hardly any radar target. Plus, they're up 85,000 feet, very high above the radar ceiling. So it's very hard. That's why that balloon was not even spotted until somebody spotted it from the ground. It went by NORAD. It flew right over Canada. I don't think Canada even knew it was there. Right over the center in the United States. Not only that, but work has been done since the 1950s. Back in the 1950s, the nuclear device that they raised in that balloon to do that test, it was pretty big and heavy. Now they've got these things miniaturized, especially considering it would only take 1 kiloton size nuclear device. Tiny, tiny little nuclear device. They could practically fit it in a football-sized object. So miniaturized. And I mean, it would not be a sufficient radar target. So, at any rate, such a device could knock out the United States. Well, what would happen, you say? Glenn, what would happen if an EMP blew off over the United States? What would the aftermath look like? Well, sad to say, nothing would work. For anybody, not for the truckers that bring your groceries to your grocery store. Not for the pharmacies that provide your medicine. You remember, it destroys all the vehicles too. All your electronics in your vehicles, your car. You go out to start your car and it's fried. It just doesn't work. Especially a few of these older cars might work, but nothing new would work. Nothing from the year, say, 2000 forward. You know, maybe some cars, a few cars that were not turned on during the time of the EMP might work. But that's not the only danger we face. If you guys haven't noticed, our economic system is on the precipice of collapse. And in fact, it's math. Nothing can stop it. It's going to collapse. And we've got a division that's formed between East and West now. And they're looking to establish a new economic system. And economic systems do not like competition. That should tell you by all the wars that have been waged by the Western economic system trying to maintain its dominance in the world. A new emerging economic system does not want competition. The BRICS nations are linking together. You know? And you want to see who's the real winner in all this? Who's winning? Economically speaking? Well, follow the gold. The gold's moving from west to east at a massive rates. And so what's happening is the Saudis now are deciding, hey, we're going to join up with the BRICS. Well, yeah, we've got some oil over here, but it's very deep and hard to get. So the economic system is teetering on the verge of collapse here in the West. But what else do we got going on? Well, we got a Cold War that's developing. And say, well, Glenn, what is a Cold War? What is it? It's basically a hidden war. And the nations now, they can wage war, and you don't even know they're at war. You might see an earthquake. Say, oh, that's a fact of nature. It's an earthquake. Yeah, but they have the technology to make an earthquake now. This is what I believe, anyway. My own personal opinion, that they have the technology to make earthquakes. How is it done? Probably as simple as drilling down into the fault line. Like in America, we have a huge fault called the San Andreas Fault, and putting some sort of one of these miniaturized nuclear devices. Now, that actually, in truth, now they have them the size of a thermos bottle. It can slide right down a pipe. And bang into the fault line. Bang. A big bang, and the fault line slips. Because these plates on the Earth's crust, they slide against one another, and pressure builds up. To release that pressure, you just need some sort of an event, in quotations, that'll make the fault line slip. And then boom, bang, you got a big earthquake. And everybody says, oh, that's an act of nature. Well, what about the weather? Yeah, they can control the weather too. And you guys believe they can't do it. Well, I'll say it's my personal opinion that they can control the weather in strange and unusual ways that you've never seen before. And they can also control and pull the strings on the economy. Pull it down when they want to pull it down. The opposing side of a new Cold War. So when I tell you guys we're in trouble, we're in a massive amount of trouble. And hubris. Russia, before the war started in Ukraine, they wanted security guarantees. Well, they were snubbed. I mean, the whole thing amounts to humanity is under this disease that we call war now. So you got war, and what follows is pestilence. Diseases can spring from nowhere. Diseases that we thought we had under control. Things like antibiotic-resistant tuberculosis. Things like that come with unsanitary conditions that poverty and can totally create amongst the citizens. So when we start to see more and more homeless people, these people are they can't help it. It's just a matter of course that they're going to be unsanitary conditions where diseases can spring from that because they're not in an environment that's suitable. We live in a world where there's a very tiny window where life flourishes. And we've been in a very calm period in human history where there's been an expansion of credit for the last 40 or 50 years. And it's an unusual period, a very calm, that's allowed the population on Earth to expand. Now suddenly we're hitting a period that's unusual to all of us. but perhaps not unusual when you compare it to world history. But it's going to be, because we have these weapons that are weapon systems that are unbelievable, and governments out there, are right now in a period of turmoil where a new financial system is trying to emerge. And the old financial system, it reminds me of dying empires, kind of like the Roman Empire. An empire can expand all the way around the earth, but once it starts to die, once it's corrupted from within, kind of like the Roman Empire, and then later the British Empire. Look at Britain now, compared to what they were when the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, this, call it empire, that's been established, it's become NATO. First it was SHAPE, Strategic Allied Headquarters in Europe, SHAPE. It became NATO. And then, well, they were actually one and the same thing, SHAPE and NATO. SHAPE was a military arm of NATO. And this alliance that includes the United States of America and includes Canada too. Where does it all end? How can we escape all of these problems? Well, the answer is there's too many. They're coming at us from too many different directions. So how's it all going to conclude? The answer is I don't exactly know. There's too many variables in this situation. But what I can tell you is we're headed towards some sort of an absolute disaster. And what I think, personally, that it's going to entail is a breakdown of essential services, and a breakdown of policing, and a breakdown possibly of the power grid, and a breakdown of almost everything that you believe and hold dear in your life that keeps your life running. Things like medication, a breakdown of society in general, to the point where it's like this picture in behind me here, just a world that's very hard to live in. And you need several things in your life in order to be able to survive. First, you need shelter. And I mean, that shelter can be just something as simple as the times that we're going in, you might end up living in a hole in the ground, or an old water tank or something like that. But as long as it can keep the rain off of you and keep you from being cold or too hot or being shot at, it's successful shelter. Because you don't want to be exposed to the elements. So it's going to be a time that's so difficult coming up. Such a difficult period. And how long is it going to last? I'm not exactly sure. But you're going to need food. You're going to need shelter. You're going to need medication at times, perhaps. What can I say? You're going to want to know what's happening around you when this occurs. Because that's going to be one of the big things that people don't realize is when this whole thing shuts down, and I believe it's going to, I can't tell you exactly how long from now. Maybe we might have a year left. We might have 2 years left. Maybe. I'm being fairly optimistic there. But when this whole thing shuts down, the first thing you're going to want to know is information on what just happened. Because how it's going to look to you is the power's going to go out. That's the most likely way it's going to look when it first starts. And you're going to be expecting the power to come back on. You're going to want information. And you're not going to be able to get any information. Your neighbors are not going to know what happened either. Nobody's going to know what happened. The power's just going to be off the grid. So you're going to be sitting there waiting for the grid to come back on, thinking that your life is going to come back on. But you're going to wait and wait and wait. After a certain amount of time, probably a week or two goes by, people are going to start to get restless. And they're going to do things that restless people do. And the word's going to go out that there is no services anymore. There's no electricity, and nobody's going to know what happened. This is when you're going to need food, you're going to need water, you're going to need sanitation, you're going to need everything. You're going to need, this system's been providing for you that's not providing for you anymore. And I know a lot of you out there are saying, Glenn, you're being an alarmist. Well, I'm not really, and the reason why is because going back like to the 1800s and stuff, we could have a power grid outage and stuff like that, but we wouldn't even notice it because we didn't have power. Nobody had power. We all had a sustainable way of living. We all lived that way. We all lived on small farms and stuff, or we lived in our cities were still small going back over 100 years ago. And we had horses. We had buggies. Horses aren't affected by an EMP. The power grid goes down. They're not affected by it. They don't know. They'll continue to work for you as long as you got a little bit of oats to feed them. They can plow your field. We had horses. We had cattle. We had ranches. We've had food production on small scale all across the country. That was all dug up and destroyed so that we could put in these big conglomerate farms. Factory-owned farms and stuff. Do you think they're going to operate if the banking system goes down? We've made ourselves vulnerable. Our system of even moving food into the urban centers and stuff, everything about this entire system is an enormous vulnerability. And I'm sitting here warning you. You're like people that's living below a dam. And the guy comes down, he says, you all know that we've been having flood and rain. Yeah, you say, yeah, it rains all the time. Don't worry about rain. He says, well, the dam's overflowing up the hill from you guys, about 5 miles from here. And they say, come on. No, he says the dam's overflowing, the cracks are starting to develop in the dam, and there's more rain coming in. He says, this dam's going to break. And you guys are living downriver from it. Well, that's what I'm telling you guys right now. The system has created enormous vulnerabilities where there is no redundant systems in place to back up to take care of us. Just something as simple as the trucking system breaking down can yield a tremendous chaos. And you know, when the thing does start to shut down at a certain point, all the people are going to panic. By that time, they're in ahead of you guys. They will be like a horde of locusts going into your grocery store. Don't think it can happen? That's if the power's still on. And even if the power's out, how long do you think it's going to take them to strip the shelves bare before they get hungry and desperate? You get a big crowd of them. The power's out. Say the grid's down for a week or two. And you get a big crowd of them in front of the store milling around. First thing, hundreds of them. First thing you know, they're going to be throwing a brick through the window. And they're all going to be going inside and taking everything that's in there. It only takes a matter of minutes. And there'll be nothing left but a few grains of rice on the floor someplace that have been rolled around in laundry detergent. Yeah, sure, it's going to be fun to pick those. Somebody will come along and actually pick those grains of rice up one by one and wash them off and try to have them for dinner, because that's how desperate people are going to be. I'm telling you, the decay and collapse of this society could be something more enormous than you could ever imagine. Now is the time to prepare, but preparation doesn't mean absolutely that you're going to succeed in making it through this. And how long is it going to last? It's more than likely, and this is what they said, and I'll leave you guys with this as a kicker. It's said that if the power grid goes down in the United States, total power grid outage, and you know the power grid's all interconnected. And when it all goes down, I don't even know if they can turn it back on, because when they try to turn it back on, it acts as a dead short. Because it has to stay up and running all the time. We've built this world for ourselves. It's so vulnerable. I just can't, I keep saying that, but it's absolutely true. They said that after a certain period of time, I think it was 4 months, 90% of the population will be gone. But that's at the point where people could start to reorganize in a much smaller way than we had before. A much more localized community way. Humanity could start to reorganize with a reduced population of over 90%. Thank you guys for listening to this show. I know it's kind of depressing, but you gotta face facts. You gotta be brave. You gotta say, hey, these are the facts out there. This is what's really happening in the world. Geopolitically, it's a total disaster. And we got the world divided 50-50. Pretty much 50-50. NATO, one side 50%, and the other side of the world 50%. How can you get a situation any worse than that? Where both sides are armed with nuclear weapons. And intriguing weapons that we've never seen before, that we couldn't even believe are real. Miniaturized weapons that are, like, devastatingly powerful. Time to prepare, guys. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.